November 3, 2025, 3 a.m. Pacific Ocean, roughly 200 miles southwest of Hawaii. The sea was eerily calm, a vast mirror of silver under the moonlight, concealing a deadly presence below. At a depth of 125 meters drifted the Russian nuclear submarine K-549 Prince Vladimir, a Borealis-class vessel worth nearly $890 million. Officially, it was on a scientific patrol. In reality, it was a silent threat aimed directly at Washington. For 9 days, the submarine had slipped beneath U.S. surveillance, unseen by satellites and unheard by sonar. Moving no faster than 6 knots, it played the role of a harmless research craft. But inside its pressure hull, 16,000 tons of steel encased 6 or 30 Bulava-M intercontinental missiles, each capable of carrying 10 100-kiloton thermonuclear warheads enough to annihilate 60 cities within minutes. This was Operation Northern Spear, a mission secretly approved by Moscow on October 2, 2025. Its purpose was not open war, but intimidation, a demonstration meant to force the United States into submission after crippling economic sanctions. Inside the dimly lit control room, 142 crew members worked in silence. The thick air smelled of metal and machine oil. Warning lights flickered red across the panels as the submarine's systems hummed with deadly precision. Outside, the crushing pressure over 5,000 pounds per square inch could turn a man to pulp in an instant. Then, without a word, the calm broke. 6 or 30 Bulava-M missiles burst through the ocean's surface like blazing arrows, tearing the night sky open. Each carried a warhead aimed straight at Pearl Harbor, home to the U.S. Navy's Pacific Logistics Command, a target whose destruction could cripple American naval operations for months. In response, the United States launched Operation Iron Storm. 1 EA-18G Growler and 3 F-35A Lightning II jets roared into the night, armed with AGM-158 Krasm cruise missiles, their mission clear. Strike Vladivostok Naval Base, the pride of Russia's Pacific Fleet. Would the U.S. intercept the incoming missiles in time, or would the skies over Hawaii burn with nuclear fire? The clock had begun ticking. The captain, a 42-year-old veteran from Murmansk, fixed his eyes on the glowing digits of the digital clock. 8:45 a.m., Moscow time. A secure message flashed across the encrypted channel: prepare for test launch. Target, Hawaiian perimeter. 6 words powerful enough to alter history. It wasn't a drill, it was a real nuclear test, a strike planned just 480 miles from U.S. territory. The boldest Russian move since the height of the Cold War. Above them, the Pacific shimmered beneath the morning sun. Commercial planes traced lazy arcs across the sky, and fishermen from Honolulu pushed their boats out to sea, unaware that death lurked beneath them. A submarine armed with 6 warheads, each capable of releasing 1,200 times the energy of Hiroshima. The coordinates were already locked in: latitude 20.8 degrees north, longitude 156.3 degrees west. This wasn't an attack on a battlefield, it was a message, a warning written in fire. At 9 a.m. Hawaii time, the command channel turned green. The moment the light changed, the ocean silence would break and the United States would face its closest brush with nuclear threat in over 6 decades. By 9:45 a.m., off the coast of Oahu, Hawaii, the sun glittered over Pearl Harbor. The morning air was still, deceptively calm. Beneath that peace, danger was already awake. Inside the U.S. Navy Logistics Command, more than 1,200 sailors had just begun their shifts. Technicians worked on the A/Spy-6 radar array, a $240 million early warning system capable of tracking threats 1,500 miles away, but it had been offline for 48 hours due to a minor software synchronization error. At 2:17 a.m., both backup sensors had failed, leaving the entire Hawaiian defense perimeter completely blind. No radar, no alerts, no watchful eyes on the horizon. At 9:52 a.m. Petty Officer Elias Ward, 27, noticed faint rhythmic echoes on a backup monitor, low-frequency pulses coming from the southwest, about 210 nautical miles away. He logged it, reported it, and was told it was probably atmospheric interference. That was the last warning anyone received. 9 miles off the coast, the Russian submarine K-549 Prince Vladimir hovered silently at a depth of 90 meters. Inside, alarms turned red as the launch tubes opened in sequence. The captain's voice cut through the tension: it's time. Launch. At 10:02 a.m., 6 or 30 Bulava-M missiles roared from the depths, punching through the Pacific with 800 tons of pressure per square inch, slicing toward Oahu at Mach 6.9. The calm waters of Hawaii were now the front line of the unthinkable. Each missile carried a 100-kiloton thermonuclear warhead, roughly 10 times the blast that destroyed Hiroshima. Moments later, the base's Patriot PAC-3 batteries picked up the launch signature. Operators scrambled, tracking the incoming warheads on backup screens and firing 15 interceptors. 5 incoming missiles were destroyed, but 2 got through. With the first warhead detonated over the fuel depot, unleashing a firestorm of molten metal. Some 3.8 million liters of jet fuel ignited, producing a fireball that ballooned 67 kilometers across and sent a smoke column nearly 960 meters into the sky. The ground heaved as hangars collapsed like cardboard. A single shockwave shattered 6,200 windows across the harbor. For seconds later, the second warhead struck the main power plant. The entire western grid plunged into darkness. Heat warped runways, steel ran like rivers, and the base became an inferno. Within minutes, the human toll mounted: 17 dead, 320 wounded, and 89 burned beyond recognition. Economic losses topped $6.3 billion, about a quarter of Hawaii's GDP, while satellites in orbit recorded a crimson scar spreading over Oahu. The Pacific was no longer simply blue, it was streaked with smoke and fire. Far below the waves, the submarine that had launched the attack slipped back into silence. Back in Washington, at 10:25 a.m., the Situation Room fell mute. Screens glowed with images of burning hangars and towering smoke. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs stood, expression unreadable, and spoke 3 words that could open a new front: authorize immediate retaliation. 2 minutes later, Operation Iron Tempest was born. Encrypted orders thundered across the Pacific aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford, the $13 billion carrier operating in the East China Sea. Alarms screamed and crews sprinted to stations. 4 aircraft were prepared: 1 EA-18G Growler for electronic warfare and 3 F-35 Lightning II fighters loaded with a combined 15 long-range AGM-158 cruise missiles. At 10:46 a.m. their engines screamed, and the formation climbed to 41,000 feet, heading west at Mach 0.92 toward its target Vladivostok Naval Base, 1,025 kilometers away, the jewel of the Russian Pacific Fleet. Beneath its granite cliffs sat an array of assets: 4 Boreai submarines, 2 Yazan-M attack boats, the missile cruiser Variag, and over 6,000 naval personnel. In Washington, commanders watched as radar arcs began to converge, thin green blades slicing across the screens. Aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford, the flight deck trembled under the roar of afterburners as jets tore through the sky. For the first time in half a century, American strike aircraft weren't defending, they were hunting. Over the endless Pacific, 4 dark silhouettes cut through the clouds, silent and unstoppable. The war had shifted from defense to offense, and the countdown to retaliation had begun. 4:55 p.m., Vladivostok time, the city lay under a dull gray sky, its harbor wrapped in fog. Beneath the mist, the Russian Pacific Fleet waited for Boreai nuclear submarines, 2 Yazan-M attack subs, the missile cruiser Variag, and nearly 6,000 naval personnel spread across dry docks and fortified bunkers. For decades, this base had been known as the Iron Fortress of the East. That illusion was about to end. At 5:01 p.m., radar operators inside Fleet Command noticed faint static crawling across their screens, then the images shattered into chaos. Dozens of phantom aircraft appeared, darting across the display at impossible speeds. Electronic interference, the commander shouted. But it was already too late. 21 seconds earlier, high above the Sea of Japan, the EA-18G Growler had activated its ALQ-249 next-gen jamming pods, unleashing 600 megawatts of electromagnetic noise. Every radar within 120 miles went blind. At 5:03 p.m., 3 F-35 Lightning II fighters broke formation, plunging from 41,000 feet at Mach 1.2. From beneath their wings, 15 AGM-158C RASM cruise missiles dropped into the clouds, skimming the waves at 200 feet above the sea. Each carried a 450-kilogram tungsten warhead, intelligent, heat-seeking, and almost impossible to stop. The Russian S-400 defense network roared to life, launching 12 interceptors each, a $9 million attempt to halt the inevitable. Only 5 found their marks. The remaining missiles sliced through the fog, closing on Vladivostok at over 680 mph. At 5:05 p.m., the first missile struck Dry Dock 2, where a Yazan-M submarine was being refitted. The blast vaporized 200 tons of steel, hurling molten debris a quarter mile into the air. 11 seconds later, a second missile slammed into the fuel storage depot, igniting 72,000 gallons of diesel and turning the harbor into a lake of fire. By 5:06 p.m., 5 more warheads punched into the submarine pens carved beneath Mount Clenavea, tearing through reinforced concrete and burying that iron fortress under a storm of flame and steel. The age of silent deterrence was over. Modern warfare had just rewritten its rules. In the skies above Vladivostok, the concrete bunker's 6-meter roof shattered like brittle glass, sending shockwaves through the mountain. Beneath it, torpedo magazines erupted in a rolling chain of detonations. 13 in total, each one fiercer than the last. Fire ripped through the base, climbing nearly 2,000 feet into the night sky, a pillar of flame visible from Nikotka, 70 kilometers away. By 5:09 p.m., the Growler had completed its run. Its jammers fizzled out, and silence returned, broken only by the roar of burning metal. The harbor was an inferno. Ships twisted at their moorings, submarines lay split open, and nearly 1,850 Russian sailors were dead or wounded. From orbit, satellites captured a scene of hell on Earth. Vladivostok burning, its coastline glowing red against the black sea. Washington, the Pentagon's message was short and merciless: target neutralized. Deterrence restored, but everyone knew deterrence was dead. The fire had only just begun. 6:30 p.m., November 3, 2025. Pacific Command, Pearl Harbor. The flames on Oahu had dimmed, but the horizon still bled red. Across the Pacific, Vladivostok smoldered beneath a cloud of black smoke. In less than 9 hours, 2 precision strikes, 1 Russian, 1 American, had annihilated nearly $38 billion in military assets and claimed over 1,200 lives. Hawaii lay scarred, 17 dead, 320 wounded, and 3.8 million liters of fuel gone in an instant. Nearly 2,000 homes lost power, flights were grounded, and hospitals overflowed as helicopters ferried burned victims through a toxic haze drifting toward Honolulu. Half a world away, Vladivostok was deathly silent. 850 sailors gone. The missile cruiser Varig torn in half sunk in the harbor. Radiation leaked from ruptured reactors, forcing mass evacuations as 2.3 million residents plunged into darkness. At 7:10 p.m. Washington time, the Pentagon issued another cold transmission: retaliation complete. Strategic stability restored, but the world wasn't stable, it was terrified. Stock markets collapsed by 2,400 points. Oil spiked 18% overnight. NATO went to DEFCON 3. In Beijing, state TV went black for 5 minutes, a silent signal of fear, and in Kiev, as damaged radar arrays flickered back to life, one engineer whispered, the Pacific burned, and we felt it here. By midnight, 2 scars glowed on the planet, one over Hawaii, one over Vladivostok, twin wounds visible from orbit, marking the moment the Earth itself seemed to hold its breath. As dawn broke, a grim truth settled over every capital on Earth: wars no longer needed armies to ignite. Just one blind minute. And the will to pull the trigger. November 4, 2025. The first rays of sunlight touched both ends of the Pacific, from the scorched ruins of Pearl Harbor to the smoking piers of Vladivostok. 2 nations, divided by half a world, now stared into the same horizon of ash. The ocean that once carried trade, diplomacy, and dreams had become a graveyard of pride. In Hawaii, rescue teams clawed through twisted steel and molten debris. The air was thick with the stench of burned fuel, 3.8 million liters gone in a single breath. Survivors spoke of a flash that came without warning, without sound, only heat. It felt like the sky itself was falling, whispered one sailor. Across the world, in Russia's Far East, the docks were lined with grieving families watching black smoke coil from what had once been the heart of their navy. Charred hulls floated like tombstones on the water. In Washington and Moscow, the war rooms had fallen silent. No victory speeches. No triumph. Only the cold realization that $16 billion in precision firepower had bought nothing except fear. Analysts would later call it the first limited nuclear confrontation of the modern era. But there was nothing limited about its consequences. The Pacific trade routes froze. Global markets hemorrhaged $1.3 trillion in a single day. From Beijing to London, every government began to redefine the meaning of deterrence and what it truly costs to preserve it. By nightfall, the sea had calmed again, silent, vast, eternal. It swallowed the wreckage, but not the memory. What began as a display of dominance ended as a warning carved in fire. The ocean remembers even when nations choose to forget, and somewhere beneath those black waters, a lone sonar ping echoed unanswered. A haunting reminder that in this century, silence no longer means peace. If you value deep analysis and want to uncover the real lessons behind today's conflicts, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep bringing you the untold stories of modern warfare.